Jewish Channel's Week in Review. Peace talks have been going on for 2 weeks. What's happened and what's planned? Surprising answers about film footage of Jewish suffering we're all familiar with. And the Jewish New Year gets going. It's the Jewish news that's changing your world on this week's episode of the Week in Review. Hello, and welcome to the Jewish Channel's Week in Review. I'm Stephen I. Weiss. The Israeli-Palestinian peace talks, now 2 weeks old, have definitely brought a lot of talk, but results in what's expected to be at least a year-long process are obviously quite difficult to discern. As we head into late September and the expiration of the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's previous agreement to a 10-month freeze on new settlement construction in the West Bank, there's predictable protests from settlers and their partisans on this front in Israel. But a perhaps surprising lack of corresponding talk from American settler sympathizers. The JTA reports that American Jewish groups supportive of West Bank settlements do not appear to be gearing up for battle, at least not yet. The JTA says these right-wing groups may resign themselves to the likelihood that Netanyahu will extend the freeze. The decision on extending the settlement freeze comes amid a threat by Palestinian Authority leadership to withdraw from the peace talks if the settlement freeze doesn't happen before the expiration of the current freeze on September 26th. On the issue of the broader progress of the peace talks, what started in Washington on September 2nd is now continuing in Israel, with Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas traveling from Ramallah to Netanyahu's official residence in Jerusalem Wednesday. And there is unfortunate news from the main group not participating in the peace talks, Hamas, which controls the Gaza Strip. Rocket attacks against southern Israel have increased in recent weeks, with approximately 25 rockets and mortars launched from Gaza since the announcement of peace talks. That joins the slaying of 4 individuals soon after peace talks were announced, which left 7 orphans. And the possibility of reining in Hamas through joining the negotiations looks bleak, as Hamas recently canceled talks with Abbas's Fatah party. Moving on to a discussion of Jewish history, and a very curious question that's been overlooked for decades. We're all familiar with the many reels of footage of Jewish suffering during the Holocaust, but we don't ask who made that footage. Why was the killing of Jews documented? Who had that access? What purpose was it supposed to serve? As Rebecca Honig-Friedman reports, one documentarian has found a surprising answer. The Nazis themselves made the footage for propaganda purposes. Here's her report.
A Film Unfinished is a different kind of Holocaust documentary. Directed by Israeli filmmaker Yael Hersansky, the documentary deconstructs an unfinished Nazi propaganda film shot in the Warsaw Ghetto in the spring of 1942, just a few months before the ghetto was liquidated and 75% of its residents gassed in Treblinka.
When I watched this film, the 62 minutes, I was shocked not only by the intensity of the images, but also by the fact that some of the images I knew already because I saw them in so many films, but I never imagined such a different context.
Those familiar with documentaries about the Holocaust will also recognize some of the images seen in A Film Unfinished. But have you ever thought about who filmed them or why? Those questions, rather than a particular period in history, are the subject of this documentary, which takes a critical look at footage that has become all too familiar to many of us.
We don't have an infinite quantity of footage, and filmmakers used to recycle it from one film to another, and it becomes this faraway black and white, as if objective documentation of that part in history. And I always had the feeling that it contains much more than we are educated to see.
For more from the director of A Film Unfinished, including her take on why the propaganda film was never completed, tune into the full broadcast version of the Week in Review.
Thank you, Rebecca. With the Jewish New Year now upon us, we at the Jewish Channel would like to thank you for joining us every week on TV, and those of you who join us in our abbreviated webcast as well. We wish all of our viewers a Shana Tova, a Gut Yor, and a happy and healthy New Year. That's all for this week. For more news and analysis from the Jewish Channel during the week, please check out our blog at newsdesk.tjctv.com. From all of us here at the Jewish Channel, be well. The Jewish Channel is available on cable. IO Optimum Cable Channel 291, Time Warner Cable Channel 528, RCN Channel 268, Verizon Fios Channel 900, and Cox Cable Channel 1. For more information, visit tjctv.com.